Calvin, can you start the tape, please?
It started. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's we're coming in at 7:36 p.m. And of course, as we know, the first thing we do is the meeting script to get things started. So let me jump into that. Good evening, fellow commissioners and general public. My name is Mike Champness. I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Commission. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the county website and on YouTube. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by new state legislation and FOIA, the Transportation Advisory Commission needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It is a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of this commission is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate level for all other members. I ask each of you to pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. I'm asking each commissioner participating in this meeting to state your name and the location in which you're participating when I mention your name. At large, Linda Sperling. Commissioner Sperling.
I am here and I am participating from my home in scenic Clifton, Virginia.
All right. Braddock District, the aforementioned beaten up Kevin Morris.
Present from Burke, Virginia.
Thank you. Dranesville District, Mike Champness. I'm here in McLean. Hunter Mill District, Commissioner Kelly Westenhoff.
I'm here at my home in Reston.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Mason District, Commissioner Roger Hoskin.
Roger Hoskins is here in historic Falls Church.
Okay. Mount Vernon District, Commissioner Pete Sitnick. Okay, not at the moment. Lee District, Commissioner Alexis Glenn.
I'm here in Alexandria.
Okay. And Providence District, Commissioner Jeremy Hancock.
Hi, Jeremy Hancock in Falls Church.
Okay. And Springfield District, Commissioner Eric Thiel. Okay, we'll go back to that. And Sully District, Commissioner David Skiles. I think we heard you before.
Present from my residence in Chantilly.
Chantilly. Okay, fantastic. And finally, last but not least, Fairfax Area Disability Services Board and our esteemed Vice Chair, Commissioner Mary Pauline Jones.
I am here from my home in the historic town of Herndon.
Herndon, okay, sounds good. At this point, I'll pass the virtual gavel to the aforementioned Vice Chair Mary Pauline Jones, and I may be heard to make the requisite motions.
Thank you. I accept the virtual gavel. I now recognize Commissioner Champness.
Thank you. I move that we have determined that each member's voice can be adequately heard by each other member of the commission. It is so moved.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Seconded. Braddock.
Yes, thank you. All right, we have a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. I next move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this commission to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. I further move that this commission may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line. The public may access this meeting by WebEx online platform or by calling 1-415-655-0001 or 1-844-621-3956, toll free, and entering the access code 179-976-2279. The phone number for ADA is 711. Access information is also available at the TAC website. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Roger. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Finally, I move that all the matters on the agenda previously furnished and posted on the TAC website are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of this commission's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Seconded. Braddock.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously. I give you back the virtual gavel.
Thank you very much. We will now start the tax business per the approved agenda. 7:42. I don't have any remarks to start right now. I did pass out some results from the offsite here just moments before the meeting. So I know nobody had a chance to look at them, so we'll talk about those a little later. One other thing I will just mention, and actually I'll do it in just a moment when we talk about the minutes. So that's it. I would also like to welcome our public and guests. First, are there any members of the public who are listening in by phone here this evening?
Oh, there's none.
I guess not. Obviously, Calvin, thank you so much for being here. Noel, as always, we appreciate you coming in for the annual legislative update. And so moving on now to the acceptance of the meeting minutes. I note that Calvin has sent out the meeting. Well, actually, you sent the meeting minutes to Mayor Pauline and there was a slight adjustment to them. Have you sent them out to the commissioners yet?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Okay. Have commissioners had a chance to look at the meeting minutes so they feel comfortable approving them now, or would they prefer to delay that action?
I did have one edit. Would you like that now?
Sure, let's do it. Yes, please.
I guess, excuse me, at the end, I guess the last bullet point, Commissioner Hancock noted Greater Washington Partnership. I think the last word should be commuting.
Yes, I think you're right. Okay. And there was any other commissioners have any other edits or comments they'd like to make on the minutes? One thing I will ask commissioners to do, you probably have already, but just to be sure, we've been identifying our location throughout these meetings here. Apparently there's now a rule that says you have to do so. So we'll continue to do so. But you'll note that Calvin added our locations where he believes we were, where he believes we said we were at the February meeting. So if you could just look at your locations in the meeting minutes, or I can read them off if you like. In fact, I'll just go do that very quickly. If you weren't at that place, let me know where you were. I was in McLean, Mary Pauline, you were in Herndon, right?
Sorry, had issues unmuting. Yes, I was in Herndon.
Okay. Well, I tell you what I'll do is I'll read through this, and then when I'm done, if I got anything wrong, we'll fix it. So let me just go through. Roger Hoskin, Falls Church. Linda Sperling, Braddock. Kevin, Braddock. Alexis Glenn, Alexandria. Pete Sidnick, Mount Vernon. Jeremy Hancock, Falls Church. Eric, Fairfax Station. David Skiles, Chantilly.
Mike, this is Kelly. I would note that I'm neither listed as members in attendance or as being there from Reston. I just now noticed that. I went back to the top paragraph.
Yep,
I know it's
you are
there
correct.
because it's mentioned later in the notes.
Yes, you're not on the list. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, David, I'm very glad you're here this evening, but I don't think you were here at the last meeting, were you? So I don't think you were with us last month. Okay.
Mike,
Yes.
it's Kevin. I'm listed as Braddock. Is that okay? Because I normally say Burke.
Let's go Burke. And in fact, Linda, you normally say Clifton, and then it's got Braddock here. Okay. Okay. Kelly, where were you last month when you dialed in? We'll obviously get the meeting minutes adjusted here. Okay.
Where I have been every day since March 15th of 2020. And that would be the thriving metropolis of Reston, Virginia.
Not that anybody's bitter in the least about that. Okay, appreciate it. Appreciate
I'm
it.
just a little weary.
It is a thriving metropolis.
That's more weariness than bitterness, absolutely. Linda, I see you're there. Should we put Clifton for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And David, just to be sure, I don't, were you or were you not with us last month? I don't think you were. Is David with us now? All right. So we'll follow up with that one there. Okay, took a little longer than planned. I tell you what I would like to suggest is entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes as discussed, allowing me to confirm the location of David Skiles, the presence or absence of David Skiles and his location prior to publishing the minutes.
So moved.
Moved, okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Honestly, I'm a little uncomfortable with it.
Okay, that's fine.
Because if we have this much confusion over who was there and not, we probably need to read these minutes in detail to make sure they accurately reflect what we all remember.
Okay, that's fine. We have delayed meeting minutes in the past to review. In fact, we still have the November meeting minutes that are outstanding. So, okay, without taking that to a vote, what we'll do then is we will adjust the minutes here to reflect the locations and ask commissioners to please have a look.
Mike, just to clarify, if we had in fact approved the minutes and edits were found after the fact, can they not be adjusted at the next meeting?
They could be, but I don't mind waiting. You know, I was asking for permission for sort of one specific technical and conforming change, but respect Kelly's position, that's certainly reasonable. No problem waiting here. And I just assume do it all at once as opposed to do it and then come back again and do it later.
Okay, I just wanted to put that out as an option.
Yeah. You know, commissioners, any other commissioners feel strongly that way?
No, I don't feel strongly one way or the other. If there's a way to change it later, then that's fine. 6 to 1, half dozen.
I guess my only concern is whether we'd have to post it online. I'd prefer not to have minutes that we'd have to correct later.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Skiles and Chantilly. I make a motion to defer. I make a motion to defer the minutes until the April meeting.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we want any discussion of the motion? If there's no discussion, the motion will bring to a vote. All those in favor of the Skiles motion to delay consideration of these meeting minutes until April, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion is unanimously approved. We will delay consideration of the February meeting minutes until April. Okay. All right. With that bit of business then, we move on to our prime topic of the evening, and that is the General Assembly Special Session Update. Those who've been with the commission for a number of years know that I don't mean, I'm making a joke, but I am serious. It's one of the highlights of the year. We enjoy finding out what our legislature is up to. So Noelle is kind enough to come each year and give us that update. So for some of you, this will be the first time to see that. And so because particularly with the work we did on the offsite back in February, this was one of the topics we knew we wanted to sort of keep aware of as we go forward. And so Noelle, appreciate again your willingness to come here and talk to us yet again. And so with that, I will turn the floor over to you for your presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those that might not know me, my name is Noelle Dominguez. I'm the Coordination Section Chief here at FCDT. I'm also part of the county's lobbying team who go down to Richmond and lobby on behalf of the county during the General Assembly session. Though I think this year's lobbying was a bit different than others due to the pandemic, and I'll touch on that briefly before I go into the transportation sections. Just the General Assembly did meet as scheduled. They started on the second Wednesday of January. However, things looked a bit different this year. As opposed to meeting in the Pocahontas building or the General Assembly building, the Senate met at the Science Museum, where they were spaced socially distanced apart, but they did meet in person. And the House met completely virtually. People attended, or the public attended or watched all via stream, whether it was the House or the Senate, for both the floor as well as all of the committees. Due to the interesting situation we were in, they did significantly limit the bills that were that could be offered by members of the General Assembly. So this year, I believe the senators were limited to 12 and House members were limited to 7. It's not unheard of for some members to have 30, 40, certain ones tend to have 60 bills a session. So this was a significant reduction from how things usually are. But at the end of the day, the General Assembly did adjourn as generally scheduled, and they now everything is with the governor. He has until March 31st to propose. He has the ability to sign bills, veto bills, or propose any amendments. He's already signed some. And then once that deadline, which again is March 31st, comes, the General Assembly will meet the following week for a one-day session to act on whether or not they approve or disagree with the governor's actions. So that's just a general overview on the session. I did, like everyone, all the other lobbyists, it was a matter of figuring out new schedules, figuring out how to contact people when, and Mr. Skiles is well aware of this. During the session, we're hang out in halls and try to catch General Assembly members to advocate on the positions, myself for the county. There wasn't that this year. The General Assembly building was closed down. There was no one there, so it made things a bit interesting. But at the end of the day, they did pass some things, so I do want to go through those. I believe Kelvin sent you all the board's final legislative report, which was adopted by the board on March 8th. He sent a link that goes to the county's website. I'm going to share that exact document to kind of go over what I'm talking about. Please let me know if you can see it. You all should see a PDF Foxit Phantom with the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors General Assembly final legislative report.
Got it.
You have it? Okay, great. So I will say, as far as transportation, things were not as busy as they have been in the past. And I think that was largely due to the fact that last year there was a gigantic transportation funding bill that passed that redid a lot of regional and local and so more statewide funding as well as processes. That was one of the biggest bills up until this year that I think I'd ever seen. This year had another bill that took the cake as far as page limits, not transportation related. But yeah, so it was a bit slow transportation, but I am going to go through a couple of things. On page 7 of the report, these pages and going to that account could usually run 2 or 3 pages long. The summaries provided on the funding core services for regional transportation funding and for transportation funding in general. But as I just mentioned, HB 1414 and SB 890, last year's omnibus transportation bills, kind of did a lot. So it was fairly slow this year in regional transportation. There were a couple of bills related to it, but not for our region. The General Assembly did pass HB 1893 and SB 1212, which authorized the creation of a new River Valley Passenger Rail Station Authority. That's down around Planning District 4 to help with passenger rail in that area. And then unsuccessfully was HB 1910, which was Delegate Cole's bill, which would have created a new mechanism to set up a regional authority. His bill was aimed at the Fredericksburg region, but there were some concerns raised by various parties, and that bill did not pass. Continuing on to transportation funding at the statewide level, there weren't really a lot of bills related to transportation funding. There was an effort, HB 2071 and SB 1350, as it originally introduced, they would have added resiliency to the smart scale process. So for those that may not be aware, smart scale is the process created by the General Assembly several years ago, and it decides how state funding is allocated. And they score on various factors and criteria, but the main 5 or 6 factors right now are safety. Let me see. There's safety, accessibility, land use, economic development, congestion, and environmental issues. And this would have added resiliency to as one of the another criteria to smart scale. However, this also defined resiliency as to mean the capability of a transportation project or strategy to anticipate, prepare for, or respond to, or recover from significant multi-hazard threats, including natural disasters, recurrent tidal flooding, permanent flooding from sea level rise, and extreme weather events. So this was, I believe, aimed at the Hampton Roads region to address some of that, what is anticipated to happen. However, there are concerns raised by the rest of the state about this giving more emphasis and making, might lead to only one part of the state scoring better in smart scale. So it was amended, and instead the bill that passed, it asks or tells the CTB to consider resiliency when updated the statewide transportation plan. That's called VTrans. That's a long-term plan, but it's not directly related to funding. And they removed the definition of resiliency, arguing that resiliency might be something different in different parts of the state. And then it also has the Commissioner of Highways to ensure resiliency is incorporated into the design standards for new construction projects. So once that was amended and resiliency was taken out of smart scale, that bill did pass. So those were kind of all that had to do with transportation funding until the budget happened. And I'm going to scoot ahead now to page, I believe, 13, which deals with what was discussed as part of the budget. So tiny bit of background, the coronavirus relief package that was passed in December included funding to help transit systems across the country. And I'm sure you all saw the articles about the funding that would come to the region to assist WMATA and other transit service. But it also included funding that went to state transportation departments to address various needs. So what that does, and the state's portion of that is expected to be about $230 million that would come to the state. So the House, when they passed the bill, didn't include that money in their projections. The Senate, however, chose to specify which projects and programs this should have gone to. So the Commonwealth, during the budget conference, they talked things over, and what they did was they combined that funding with $35 million in unobligated balances from 2 state transportation programs that didn't have that, or that where that funding was not necessary at the moment, as well as $55 million from the general fund that the governor had already noted in his original budget to assist a couple of areas. And they essentially created what is they call it the 2021 Transportation Funding Initiative, which allocates about $320 million to various projects and programs throughout the Commonwealth. I'm not going to go through all of those, but there are some related to that could impact our region, so I do want to mention those. First is WMATA support. If you all may know, in 2018, the General Assembly enacted legislation to provide Virginia's share of the $500 million annually needed for WMATA state of good repair. A large portion of that was taken from regional revenues and local revenues that were already existing, and we're still working to get those reinstated. But one of those revenues that was redirected to WMATA was a regional hotels tax, transient occupancy tax. As you all are aware, the pandemic has hit the hotel industry somewhat hard. So the state let the finance committee know, or the money committees know in January, that the $154 million was going to be about $22 million short this year, or for the next couple of years, largely due to the reduced projections in the TOT. So what the final budget that passed the GA did was it provides up to, up to 32.4 million for WMATA services. The first tranche of that, so we think about 22 million, would go to make up that the amount that is projected to reduce for this next year. So about 22 million of that would go to make sure the state meets its commitment to the 500 million annual state of good repair funding. The remaining amount of that, which is about 10 million, would actually be provided to the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission that would then be used to help localities with their local obligations for WMATA operating service. Right now, your 5/6 metro jurisdictions, Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, and the city of Fairfax, each have to pay, a bill each. It's broken up, but every year we have to pay a certain amount of money. Loudon, I think they are, and why I say 6 is I'm not quite sure where they are in the funding, if they're paying yet or not. But of those metro jurisdictions, we all have an annual commitment. The pandemic has hit our local revenues as well, so this would help us with our with this next year's budget to address our WMATA bills. So that was the WMATA funding. The next one I do want to mention is the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. This bill was created last year. It was broken up into 2 pots. One provides service to regional connectivity in urban areas with populations over 100,000. Another portion of it goes to assist with the impacts of fares on low-income individuals. So this, what the budget did is it noted that 3.6 million of this funding needs to be directed to long-distance commuter bus service, but it also provides about $10 million to establish pilot programs for fare-free transit in urban and rural transit providers to address service right now. And then a couple more things. It provides 83.5 million to improve commuter rail service on the Virginia Railway Express Manassas line, 93 million to address the I-64 corridor in the Hampton Roads of Richmond, 83.5 million to expand passenger rail service from Roanoke to the New River Valley, 10 million to expand and enhance safety and connectivity of existing statewide trail network, and 10 million to Falls Church in coordination with Virginia Tech to support community development pilot road project in the city. So that's what they've chosen to do with that money. And that was all in the budget. That came towards the end. Before I move on to non-budgetary issues, does anybody have any questions?
No. Go ahead, Kevin.
Is all of Fairfax County or just parts of it considered urban?
So that program was created last year as part of the omnibus bill, and DRPT is still putting together the rules for these 2 processes. But I would think they would consider most of the county, they consider our region urban, yes.
Okay, and then the other one. They
don't have anything in writing yet, but that would be my guess.
Okay, the other one was resiliency was kind of interesting because you said they took out the definition because it could vary, but then it sounded like at the higher level they were putting it back in but not defining it. Is that right?
Yes. So what they did was originally it was going to be in smart scale, and it was defined in a way that some felt would benefit certain regions over the rest of the Commonwealth. So, and that's so they took it out of smart scale but put it into the state's long-range transportation plan. So in our region, it's kind of like at the NVTA level, not in the funding plan that's for the next couple of years, long-term 40-year look-ahead plan, that sort of thing. But they removed the definition. So it says that VTrans will consider resiliency, but it doesn't define what exactly that may be, because it may be different in Fairfax than it is in Norfolk.
Okay, we'll go with that. Thank you.
Michelle, Noel, you told us about the uses of this. What are the sources of this funding? Is it all out of general funds or?
No. It came from 3 different locations. 220 came from the coronavirus relief funding package that was passed by Congress in December. 35 came from some 2 programs within the Secretariat, the Transportation Secretariat, that funding was unobligated, hadn't been allocated somewhere yet. And then 55 million came from the general fund. The governor had already included that 55 million for transportation in his budget in December. So they combined it with some of these others and they created this transportation initiative.
All right.
Noel, on the Falls Church City grant funding that you mentioned, did you mention that because FCDOT has a role in that program, or just because it's close by?
I mentioned that just because it was one of the 6 or 7 items that was specifically noted. It does not specifically reference Virginia Tech, or it says it within Falls Church. I know we are by it, and I think I do believe it's near the West Falls Church Station, so it is definitely something near the county border. So it's something we will definitely be discussing with the city as they move forward.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to scoot ahead. The next page is that Calvin had.
Sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
Back to the smart scale factors there. Hear loud and clear what they were, and understand that the resiliency was taken out. Interestingly, one of the factors the county uses as it's trying to decide what to do is equity. I noticed it was not there. I'm just wondering, is that even discussed? Is that something noted, not noted? I'm just wondering, was that an issue down there?
I'm not sure if equity specifically referenced in smart scale itself. The factors are laid out in the code, but some of the things I do believe try to address it. Specifically, and I'm seeing if I can find it, accessibility is referenced, and that within their criteria, because they have the 6 general criteria, but then they have factors that come underneath those. And I'm trying to see if I can find the document here for a second. I apologize. So what under accessibility, some of the stuff they look at is, I apologize. Give me 1 second to find the right page.
Noel, while you're doing that, this is David Skiles from Chantilly. There was the study resolution on studying equity in transit systems that Chairwoman McQuinn had put forward.
You are right on that. I apologize for not mentioning that. That was in the study section. I skipped ahead through. I apologize. Yes. House Transportation McQuinn did put forward a resolution to study transit equity and modernization in the Commonwealth. The county did support that resolution, feeling that it goes along with our One Fairfax policy that we strive to continue to work on. And that there was funding within the budget to fund that study as well. So yes, they are looking at it in the transit arena. Then within smart scale, under accessibility, the factors that they weigh, or the measures, are access to jobs, the total population, access to jobs, disadvantaged populations, and access to multiple places. So they do try to address some equity concerns within the access to jobs. As far as one part of the state versus the other, it doesn't get into that per se, in that smart 2 different type of programs. There's the regional, which is where, and this is every jurisdiction or every region gets a certain amount of funding based on formulas and where funding comes from. So in the regional pot, our projects compete against Falls Church, against Alexandria, Arlington, Prince William, Loudoun. And based on how those, and they're all scored, well, projects across the Commonwealth are scored together. But for the regional pot, they look at our scores versus scores of the other ones within Northern Virginia. And then for statewide pot, when they're looking at that funding, they look, we would compete against Wise County, Charlottesville, that sort of thing. So, so they don't talk about it specifically and how the funding is, how specific, what reasons it goes to.
I appreciate that very much. That's a good picture there. Thank you.
Continuing on, I believe the next pages that Kelvin mentioned were they started on page 37. They went a couple pages. These are just, we create a budget chart that we use to inform the board about how things were introduced in the governor's budget, what changes were made in the House and the Senate, and then the conference. I'm not going to go through all of those. They were kind of highlighted up above, but these are in the report if you want to look through them. The other transportation issues, which Calvin sent along in the link, start on page 47. First off, I want to bring up transportation safety. As many of you may remember from last year or heard in the news, the state passed a hands-free for cell phone bill last year. It went into, they had a delayed effective date just to give more time for preparation. I believe it went into effect January 1. So as of January 1, you should not be holding your phone while driving. You never should be for safety reasons, but now it's the full-on law. They did a couple of things to clarify that. So what they did this year was, because the code is big and huge, there were various things. So here in this case, HB 1846 and SB 1335, there were different code sections that specifically dealt with what provisional licensed drivers can do and or what those with learner's permits can do. So those laws just, and these were essentially cleanups. It made them the same as a statewide, so that your learner's permit, it's no hands, no matter the reason, and your provisional driver's license is the same as a regular driver. So that's all those two bills did, is they essentially cleared things up. One other bill here under transportation safety is last year's comprehensive safety bill had numerous provisions in it related to open container laws and hands-free, though that got pulled out and addressed differently, and a couple of other seatbelt laws. And that bill ended up not passing last year, but within it was this one provision that wasn't controversial, but some people didn't like other provisions, so the bill did not pass. This bill, HB 1903, authorizes local governing bodies to reduce their speed limits under 25 miles per hour, but no less than 15 miles per hour in residential or business districts. So this was just a small portion of that giant transportation safety bill. The bill itself didn't pass last year, largely due to, I believe, the seatbelt provisions that were included in the bill. But because this was part of it, it didn't pass either. So this year, Delegate Carr had a standalone bill, and this did pass.
By the way, just very quickly, mention Tom brought up, talking about some safety issues, brought up the fact that there's now authority to lower the speed limits from 25 to 15. Got some feedback there or something, so I'm not sure what's going on, but hopefully you can hear me.
I can. I'm not sure if others can.
Sounds like Star Wars, but we can hear.
Okay. All right. I'll do it again until the next time.
Should I continue?
Please do.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't tell if you were still speaking. I apologize for that. So next up, there was a bill on crosswalk requirements. Delegate Keem originally introduced a bill that would have required new crosswalks and crosswalks receiving maintenance to be painted in a zebra pattern and have warning surface tiles at each end. This was actually brought to him by a local Girl Scout troop who felt it would help with visibility for those that may not or that may have not be able to see well. However, there were concerns raised by being overly prescriptive within the code, and that these might not work in every single situation. So the legislation was amended to instead create a work group to look into the situation, and then they would come back. Bicycle regulations. This got a lot of attention this year. HB 2262 and SB 1263, and these regard bicycle regulations. As originally introduced, this bill would have done three things. Allowed bicyclists, operators of bicycles, to treat a stop sign as a yield sign in a lot of circumstances. Required a driver of a motor vehicle to change lanes when overtaking a bicycle or certain other vehicles when the lane was not wide enough to pass with the 3 feet distance requirement, and removed the limitations on riding bicycles 2 abreast. The Senate bill passed the Senate Transportation Committee, but then died on the Senate floor. There were some concerns raised on the Senate floor, and it failed. The House bill, which was identical at the time, passed the House, came over to the Senate, passed the Senate Transportation Committee, and then on the floor, they had a floor substitute that was offered by one of the people who originally voted against the bill that kept provisions 2 and 3 in here, the ones that require a driver to change lanes and letting the bicycles ride 2 abreast, but remove the provision allowing for the yield as a, using the stop sign as a yield. Instead, it directs the state police to convene a work group to review the issues related to this situation. And with that substitute in, it did pass the Senate 21-18. So a couple of people switched that had previously voted against the previous bill, and then the House accepted those changes. So that, I think people probably saw a little bit of part of that in the news. There were some bills related to privilege cards and DMV information, specifically HB 2138. If you all may recall, last year there was a legislation allowing driver privilege cards for people with different immigration status. This authorizes the DMV to issue ID cards for non-drivers. And examples that were made were if somebody has to go to the hospital and they need an ID, or if somebody needs to pick up their child out of school and they need an ID. They might not necessarily drive, but they still might want an ID. So this would allow for that. And then there was HB 2163, which addressed the release of privileged DMV information for certain government entities. So those 2 bills also passed. And then there were a couple of bills regarding road names. Specifically, HB 1854, Delegate Sullivan authorizes Arlington County to change the name of Route 29 located within Arlington County. Sorry, I apologize. And then HB 20, and just for some background, right now, cities have a lot of authority to change road names. Counties, our roads are generally maintained by the Commonwealth, and we have to go through a process where a locality undergoes its local process. They pass a resolution, they send it to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and the Commonwealth Transportation Board acts on it. Or you can go to the state at the GA level and request a change as well. So what Delegate Sullivan's bill, it essentially authorizes Arlington to change the name to a name yet to be determined. I think they're working on that right now. But it lets them change the name of Route 29 within Arlington County. On the other side, is HB 2075. This was Joshua Cole's bill. He's from the Fredericksburg area. And originally his bill would have renamed Route US 1, those portions that are designated as Jefferson Davis Highway, would have changed it to Loving Memorial Highway. He changed the name instead to Emancipation Highway. It was noted in committee that members of the Loving family said their parents or their family would prefer not to have road names named after the family. So they changed it to Emancipation Highway. He also included a delayed enactment because there are some jurisdictions that might be in the process of changing the name right now. So this would give them an extra 6 months to finalize that. They have until January 1, but the thought is if you want to change Route 1 to be named something else, you have time to do that. If you don't do it by January 1, the state will change it for you. So those were the 2 bills that passed essentially regarding road names.
Question on Route 29. You just Arlington was given authority to rename section of 29. Fairfax was not authorized to be not asked for it, or what happened?
No, so this was a request by members, I believe, of the Lee Highway Coalition or Arlington for Delegate Sullivan to do this for Arlington. We are looking into this as well. There was a board matter by the board last fall, I believe, that asked the county staff to look into various facilities within the county and how namings and renamings would occur. There was a presentation given to the board. I'm not sure the exact date. I want to say in January. Not in transportation committee. It actually came through one of the other committees within the county, but it was a county, one of the board's committees of how we could go about doing that. So there was a proposal put together. There's the staff group to look at it. It is something the county is looking at. We're not quite as far as Arlington is at this point. So, but we did monitor this.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So that's all I have. So any questions?
Arlington hasn't changed it yet, or they haven't come up with a name, but they are going to change it.
So there was, I believe, the Highway Corridor Coalition, or I'm not going to remember the exact name. I apologize. It's within Arlington. They were working on this. They'd come up with a short name. I believe the top vote getter was also Loving Highway or Loving Street. So with this other bill, the family, I do not believe requested that the name not be named after their family. So they had some other there. I'm not sure if they've decided on something at this point, but I do know they've looked at and considered several.
Okay. Could you tell me what is the privileged information and what agencies want our DMV information? The DMV, I guess.
There's a lot of specific, I could not honestly answer that off the top of my head. There was a lot in there. Part of it had to do with the discussion about, requiring certain specific criteria for immigration status, especially considering last year's bill allowing driver privilege cards. But I also know the bill, there were lots of discussions of DMV has agreements with various entities for drivers, for driver's records, for background, for insurance, for a whole things. They mentioned hundreds or something like that they had to talk about how to go through these. So I can't tell you all the type of information, but it was, I do know they had to work on that. There were several versions to try to address all the entities that were stakeholders in the discussion.
Okay. One last one on the smart funding. I had the dubious distinction of running a task force in the Braddock district on improving the Braddock Road from Burke Lake Road down to the Beltway, roughly. And only to find out the funding, a very tough time qualifying, and apparently it just missed the cut on smart scale. But whatever increases I heard you talk about tonight, even in smart scale, I didn't get any confidence that would boost the pool of projects for at least the Braddock district and that pool of money.
So yeah, the Braddock Road project was, I think, one, if not the highest ranking project that did not get funded.
Right. That's worth something, I guess.
Those were staff recommendations. CTV has a couple of more months to discuss things, and they're taking inputs, and there'll be public hearing process. So we are still going to work to make our case that our project should be funded. None of the funding discussion that had today really impact smart scale and the available. So those were all things were, because the initiative is one-time funding, they put it on just a couple of potential pilots or specific projects, but this doesn't go through smart scale.
Okay, thanks a lot, Noel.
Anybody have any other questions?
No, this is David. I just wanted to offer the following observation that the county is really well served by Tom and Noel and Richmond, and obviously transportation and transportation funding has been a a sore subject for a long time, and fortunately there's been a lot of evolution over the past few years in terms of our transportation system being funding. But just thanks to Noel and Tom and the team for really looking out for the county and candidly for the region on a number of issues.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Absolutely, absolutely. We see that every year. We track that we're successful on. It is definitely a testament to your effort and attentiveness that all the stuff going on, you're able to keep an eye on the prize there and bring things back with Fairfax. And we're very appreciative of that. Absolutely.
And I will just say it's a team effort. Our team here at Fairfax works together. We have a whole team of people within Fairfax County, but we also work closely with all of the other liaisons for all of our neighboring jurisdictions, the local chamber, with the Transportation Authority, Transportation Alliance, NVTC. Like we tend to work together as much as possible. I think that's helped us a lot in the past couple of years, and we're working to see if we can get the rest of that funding restored to us that was taken away 2 years ago. It wasn't probably going to happen this year, but that doesn't say it's still in our package, and it's something we're still working towards.
Okay. Well, definitely. Good luck next year. I don't mean that cavalierly. We hopefully we can do that next year. Absolutely.
Well, thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much. There's no other questions. By the way, I neglected in the beginning when we were identifying a county staffer here, Brent Riddle, is of course with us this evening too. Sorry, Brent, I didn't scan down far enough on the all the screens here to see you there.
Yep. No worries. Thank you.
But if there are no other questions for Noel, we'll let you have your life back. And enjoy the rest of the evening. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And strangely enough, we are exactly on time. This is a new normal with the TAC.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, Noel. Really appreciate it. Okay. At this point of the conversation of the meeting, we will once again open up for public comments. If there are any people here from the public who would like to participate in the conversation, please do speak up now, and we will allow you to speak for a couple minutes.
There is none.
There is none. Okay. Then let's move on to the next item, is the discussion of the February 27th facilitated working session. I did pass out a draft work plan, and I'll walk through it here in a little bit. I will prepare some minutes of summary there, but there's two big reasons I didn't. One is I've actually been involved in migrant crisis on the southwest border again. Every time the migrants come in mass, I'm involved in a volunteer force effort to get some CBP folks down to help deal with that. And so once again, that's taking up a good deal of my time. And the other is, rather than spend time focusing on writing a summary of what happened, what I wanted to do was sort of look ahead a bit and try and sort of distill items into something that looked like that we could, that we turn into actions and turn into next steps and things like that. So I wanted to, with that in mind, I wanted to walk through the work plan. I can put it on the screen if need be. You have to give me a minute to do that. Or Calvin, I don't know if you could, or I did pass it out and we can just refer to them. Calvin, can you put up the work plan on the screen? Would that be okay? Could you do that?
Yes, I can. Yes. Give me a second.
Appreciate it. Well, Calvin is doing that. First off, I want to thank commissioners again who were able to participate on the 27th. It was a long day, but I think it was a very productive day. And we had a lot of good discussions about a lot of topics there. I think the facilitator really did help us draw some things out there. It was her idea in the afternoon to have commissioners break up into individually, give some thought to each of the focus areas and come back. And I think that actually helped the conversation. So that's why she's a professional. She's well paid to do this. And, we're just clients. But I thought it worked. I thought that worked very well.
David Skiles
has left the meeting.
Oh, okay. And so anyway, as we put this up here, those of you who are at the offsite and those of you who looked at the materials at the offsite, even if you weren't able to participate, we'll recognize this as some of the guiding principles that we put together and some of the priorities. But these are not exactly the same, although they are much the same as what we had before. What I'm trying to do here is I've updated and reworked and reworded a little bit the guiding principles to try and incorporate some of the comments that were made, also to clean up some awkward grammar that I had before. One thing that I don't have here in the guiding principles that I realize need to add is in the third bullet where we're talking about informing and integrating improvement priorities with economic development strategies, land use plans, equity, and environmental considerations. We should add that. But you can tell when I point out that guiding principle, that's what animated my question to Noel about the equity discussion in the smart scale activity there. There was not much discussion of these principles, during the meeting. We can certainly talk about them now, but what I'd like to do is go into the priorities a little bit, into the implementation strategy, and then open it up for conversation. I do not quite yet have action items yet, Jeremy, but we are close to it. That'll come out of the conversation with the implementation strategy there. But looking at the priorities, you will see I've kept the same topic areas, and these are the ones we use during the offsite: legacy infrastructure investments, congestion mitigation, flexible amount of POV transportation, etc. What I've done though is, again, I've done a little bit of rewording. I've added a few things that came in up during the conversation, tried to sort of tuck them in where they seem to fit. But I'm sure you can't help but notice I've got 3 of the sub-bullets that are highlighted. And those to me seem to be 3 of the primary areas that really started to emerge from the discussion as areas that we want to focus on. I'm going to start with the back one first, and that is pedestrian and bike safety. And I sent this out before I saw Kevin's face. But yes, bike safety, pedestrian safety, obviously important, but it is something that Mr. Alcorn talked about. His aide, Shamali Hoth, she talked about it. We discussed it during the offsite. This is something that a lot of people have as a priority, and certainly is something I think that it's appropriate and important for us to be involved in and to look at. The other is, I'm going to jump to the second one, which is future road design parameters. But that there, I'm going to give some credit to Roger to talking about the roads versus streets definition, because that really, in my mind, sparked a conversation about what are these roadways? What are the expectations for these roadways? What are the definitions? What can we use them for? What should they be used for? Now we're getting into the design of the roadway, something that Rachel Flynn has talked about quite a bit. And then the third is transportation demand management. You know that's an area that I've been looking at for some time. We had a meeting back in our September meeting, was looking a lot at transportation demand management, telework, and things like that. And I think that still is an important focus area. But to move to the implementation strategy, what I've done now is I've tried to sort of do this in a somewhat integrated fashion. And what I've tried to do here is suggest that as we try to decide where to go, where to start, we target activity centers, inform economic development strategy, equity priorities. Those things are not all independent. Those activity centers are associated with economic activity and things like that. But here's where I think we bring in some of the roads versus streets definitions and some of these other things. I didn't try and put them all in here because I didn't want to try and like write a policy paper on a single sheet of paper here. But this is where the lower speed limits and things like that. And I think also the general widening the aperture a little bit includes generalized access, the flexible non-POV transportation options and things like that. But the idea is that as we're trying to figure out where to look, we start with activity centers. Also, sort of along with that, pedestrian bike safety, Vision Zero, street light replacement. I called it out specifically because that was something Shamali particularly talked about, which is not the same as bike safety, but certainly related to it. And recognize that pedestrian bike safety, there's also car safety as well. Kevin is an example of the interplay between the two. We want to make sure that we have a safe activities there. And the other thing is that during our conversation, as you may recall, and I want to talk about this a little bit later, is all of the various things that should be going on. The biking activities that Mr. Alcorn talked about, but also Dale Castello is doing an event in April that I think there's some opportunities there to be involved in. And then the third of the highlight areas, to adapt our TDM strategies to a post-COVID teleworking environment. The things have changed. I think the analogy I've used is that previously we wanted to take the weight off, we wanted to go on a diet, now the weight's off. How do we keep the weight off? And one of the things we might need to do is look at and revisit our proffer strategy for how we encourage and incentivize teleworking, things like that. Not neglect the legacy investments, looking at them through sort of the updated prism, but yet recognizing the legacy infrastructure investments are legacy for a reason. There's a lot of momentum in a certain area. It doesn't mean we give up on trying to make some changes, but we recognize that the opportunity to shape things is different there. And the last is to bring in the monitoring, the development, the strategies, the partnerships. Those are really tools, I think, that we're going to want to use. We need to look at specific strategies and policies. Which ones do we want to change? Which ones would we maybe need to create? The meeting that we talked about having tonight that we were not able to, but planning to have next month, is a briefing on the comprehensive plan, so that we're able to look at the comprehensive Fairfax plan and start looking at how some of the pieces fit together there, so that we can decide which plan we need to go into, which part of the plan we eventually need to go into, which kind of changes and things like that do we need to make. Obviously, we're always on the lookout for technology opportunities and things like that. And finally, soliciting involvement from outside stakeholders based on the issues being addressed. Obviously, these are all public meetings. Somebody can participate at any time that they like. We see that doesn't often happen. But as we are focusing on, and I'll use the example bike safety, I'm sure there's a large number of groups and advocacy groups that would like to be part of that. I think that's a perfect opportunity to include them in the dialogue. We'll figure out a way to do that. We can certainly leverage their activities, their knowledge, help us learn some things faster, understand their issues quicker and things like that. But I think that that allows us to target, so to speak, groups we might start with first. Who do we need to meet with first? Well, are they working on something that we can help work on one of these three potential priorities? Now, this obviously, I put draft on the paper for a reason, because draft means draft. This is the first time it's been seen by anybody other than me. And so I know there's a long way to go from here to eventually the Board of Supervisors and things like that, of course. But this is the to me, sort of the potential outline of how we might want to consider proceeding. So with that, I'll throw it out on the table. I recognize you haven't had a chance really to digest it yet. We'll talk about this more. But I thought we'd talk about it for a little bit right now. We'll see what folks think, and then decide on some actions and next steps, and particularly as we talk about our next meetings and things like that. So with that, I'll step aside and open the floor for comments from commissioners. Everybody likes it? Roger, sorry. Kevin, okay. I thought I saw you moving your hand, so Roger, I wasn't sure, sorry.
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
The last mile delivery strategies, and then under the section flexible non-POV transportation, we're talking about taxis, Uber, Lyft, Via. I think there's been some conversation in the past about we have met with the taxi people, but the Uber, Lyft, Via people, hard to get somebody to come to a meeting and speak to us, but put that under the more general topic of logistics and last mile delivery strategies, because I'm thinking under there you ought to include things like United Parcel Service, Federal Express, even the U.S. Postal Service, because we're not talking about the last mile delivery strategies for people and or packages. And there's a lot of logistics in there, and I'd like to know something about how these companies that deliver packages see the future of their industry.
One thing I will just say is we have talked about meeting with Uber, Via, and Lyft, and unfortunately, David dropped off the meeting, so we'll talk about it later. So sorry to interrupt. I was going to bring in David, but got you.
Okay. But probably ought to throw in there Federal Express, United Parcel. I don't know if they'd even talk to us. When you're talking to private businesses, there's so much stuff that's proprietary. And of course, they can't and won't give you away any trade secrets. But how those people see the future of their industry, the kinds of things they're going to be delivering, and where they go. Are they going to probably be using streets more than roads? Well, they use them both. But and that also kind of bumps into your curbside management, no pun intended. But as I just heard this morning that, and this is the thing I was waiting for, that Federal Express, United Parcel, and Amazon, and even the U.S. Postal Service are really making a serious effort to go to electric vehicles. Now, that only tangentially affects us, but people are going to have more stuff delivered, which probably means less driving, which means we're going to have more trucks on our roads and streets. And I'm curious about what they think the main issues are in terms of transportation and their business model. What do they need to more effectively deliver packages? Where you have Lyft, Uber, and Via delivering people, they're going to be delivering packages. And you also might include in that Giant, Safeway, Harris Teeter, because more people are going to have groceries delivered, or they're going to go pick them up. That bumps into retailing, but those are all going to be transportation users, and they're going to get to be bigger transportation users, I think. This is a trend that was incipient before the pandemic, and I think it's only going to accelerate afterward. And those people are important players, and also would include the U.S. Postal Service. They're going to be delivering parcels as well, but we're going to get parcels delivered, lots of them. We're already doing that. And I think we're going to see more of it.
Okay.
So, Mike, I think you might be a friend of the court on that with Roger. As you know, I've been the one advocating to get Uber and Lyft in here. I have no problem adding UPS and FedEx. You know, I asked Tom Bashadney once about the wear and tear on our roads from all of these delivery services, Amazon and FedEx, and he said, well, it's a counterbalance because then you have less people driving to the brick and mortar store. So, you know, I thought that was an interesting response, but I would welcome all of those companies or representatives, or how many we could fit and still have a constructive meeting to do that. I guess my initial question before Roger asked his was, because that area is not highlighted, was that going to fall down on the, when we would actually get them in here?
It doesn't necessarily, but yes, if we decide that something's a priority, then certainly if there's a sort of a tie, so to speak, goes to the priority item. I think that we've had, as I've acknowledged, Uber, Via, and Lyft on our list for some time. Yes, they're a transportation option. It's a little bit of a technology sort of thing. But I think that, quite honestly, all of these things are influenced by and trumped by the commissioners, so to use that word, by the commissioners. If we want to have Uber, Lyft, and Via come in, no matter what else is going on, then we have Uber, Lyft, and Via come in. I think we do. We've talked about that. So absolutely, I think we can and still should do that.
Okay, well, the sooner we can get them in, that would be my vote. So.
Okay. Any other commissioners have comments on the potential work plan?
Let's just clarify. So what you're asking us is if there's additional items that aren't included in this?
Yes, but also what you think of the priorities, what you think of the outline of the strategy, where what I'm proposing to do is to target activity centers, and then using economic development strategies, equity priorities to inform, what we're doing there. I think that if we're talking about sort of making place, and if we're looking at trying to make the county look a bit different and the traffic move a little bit different, we're back into street design. Now I'm making that as an assertion, but I'm also making it as an assertion after we've sort of discussed it a bit, talked about it, as a group amongst ourselves, and including at the offsite. And so, Rachel Flynn is very interested in street design. And the reason for that is because that derives a number of opportunities. And so ultimately, if we're going to put some focused TAC effort on something, we have to bound it somewhat. And don't worry, I'm not asking. In fact, I wouldn't want anybody to say, these are absolutely the three, we must do these right away. I want folks to think about them. And to maybe suggest variations of them, and Roger talked about that with sort of some of the last mile stuff there and things like that. And so the idea is that this gives us I'll use a phrase, a roadmap through this very complex issue that allows us to focus sooner on important issues in areas of the county that need the most attention, I think. And that's what this is supposed to be.
And so your plan is this going to be revised into a further work plan, or is this kind of the outline you're thinking of delivering to the Board of Supervisors?
Well, if we like this, and quite honestly, as this develops, yes, this would be something that would go to the Board of Supervisors. I think you can easily see this as a table of contents. It's not ready yet, but the idea being that here are the principles we've decided that are going to guide our actions as we review things. Here are the priority areas that we're looking at. And depending on how much depth we want to get into each of them, theoretically, although I don't think we will, we could have a, 2-paragraph to 2-page discussion of the Silver Line. I don't think we want to do that because it would be sort of a disproportionate focus on our efforts there. But some of these things will require more attention and more depth. And that's, I think, one of the very tricky things for us is decide where we put anchor and where we decide to fish. And so that's why I try to put this here in this way, where what I'm suggesting is that while we absolutely need to keep aware of, and this was mentioned by Mr. Alcorn, continue to be aware of major legacy infrastructure investments. It's something commissioners here have talked about as well. We need to continue doing that, but the amount of effort necessary is manageable, and we might be able to spend some more of our time doing other things. And that depends on if there's a commissioner or two that particularly wants to dive into an area. I use myself on the TDM issue as an example, where I believe it's sort of my responsibility to root around in the TDM world and the telework world and bring stuff back.
Well, I'm really interested in this other area you have down here called micromobility, because it's related to some of these other things. We're putting that new BRT system in down there on Route 1. And if you're at all familiar with that neighborhood, there's going to be a lot of changes down there. You've got a lot of residents between Route 1 and the Potomac River, and Route 1 into the west, mostly low density, single family homes and townhouse communities that were built in the 50s and the 60s. We're not going to demolish those, at least not anytime soon. But how are you going to get people that live there and maybe want to live there to take advantage of this BRT system that's going to run from Port Belvoir up to Huntington? Now, there may be fewer of them because some are going to stay home and work, and there may be more businesses down there. But
which area was that, Roger, again? Remind me, was I right? Micromobility.
They're already doing.
No, micromobility, I understand. What location are you talking
I was talking about Route 1. We also have the same problem on Route 7. And moving the people from their domiciles to the transportation nubs around, using Route 1 as an example, the BRT stations. And when we had the program on that, we're going to have these lovely town centers there, and I think they're fine. I think they're great. You may have mixed use there, and that's great too. But you still have a lot of people that live off the grid, if you want to use an analogy. And what are they going to do? Are they going to drive their cars to the BRT station, or are they going to try to drive their cars downtown? And now some of them will ride bicycles. And I'm going to be the last person to decry bicycles. Of course, Kevin is a perfect counterfactual example. But you look at these things, and I get all this stuff from the IDP, International, and they're big bicycle advocates, and that's great. But if you look at something in those pictures, the skies are all blue, and the people are all under 40. Now, what do you do about days when it's raining pitchforks and it's icy, or you have gale force winds, and you have people who are not confident riders? They're not going to ride their bicycle. They're going to look for another way to get from their residence to either the metro station or the BRT station. And we want to encourage them, give them a choice to do something other than drive their car. Because we're probably not going to build enough parking at those transportation nodes to get them to use them. And the microtransit might be a concept.
Okay. I hear you, but also the access, the flexible non-PUV transportation is part of that targeting activity centers. Now, I say targeting activity centers. I recognize there's a lot more of the county. It isn't an activity center than is. That's kind of the roads versus streets a little bit there as well too. We could decide, and I certainly, I'll throw it out now as an example, but I certainly don't want to pursue it with Commissioner Sitnick not here, but Route 1. We could decide, and we've looked a lot at Route 1, and we may decide to continue to look a bit more in depth on Route 1, and not just Route 1 as Route 1, although yes, there's value in doing that, but Route 1 is an example for other parts of the county that are not dissimilar, therefore that maybe we can learn some lessons and apply them in other parts of the county.
Well, I think there's a plan to put some kind of BRT on Route 7. I don't expect to live to see it, even if I live to be 100. But that corridor is crowded, it's clogged. You have multifamily dwellings there. You have enriched WMATA service, but getting people to use that rather than driving. And that part of that route, as I pointed out, is not bicycle friendly at all.
Understand. If we could, Kelly, if you want to make a comment, appreciate that, right? Thank you.
Well, I've been trying to listen and be instructed. And I'm just kind of circling back to the question of what is it exactly we want to and should be doing? And if what we should be doing is learning more, then continuing to have people come in and talk to us about all these various things we are interested in is fine. And that's one option. If synthesizing what we're learning from those people and making recommendations to the supervisors as to where we think they ought to be looking, helping direct their attention, that's something else. But I'm very confused about what exactly the function is of continuing to have speakers come in and we learn stuff, and then so what? What are we doing with it? How do we make that useful to the supervisors? Because ultimately, I believe that our responsibility is to represent what the public is understanding or not understanding to the supervisors, so they can direct their transportation people to either make it more clear or to make something happen where it hasn't been happening and it needs to happen. And I'm just not exactly sure how to effectuate our role if that's what it is.
Okay. Very good point about listening to listen and listening with a specific purpose. What this implementation strategy is attempting to do is to identify the purpose for which we listen. Now, back to Kevin's point, that doesn't mean that other issues are not worth listening to, and they might be something that feeds into this, or it could be something we just want to do. I mean, theoretically, we've gone to visit the bus repair terminal there. I mean, strictly speaking, you don't need to go to the bus terminal to really, make policy recommendations. But it's very interesting to see what they're doing, and great to sort of get our hands dirty, so to speak, and go to have a look. So, Kelly, as we talk about things, what we would do is the majority of most of whatever our meetings would be aimed at learning enough about these particular areas to be able to make actionable recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. What should we do with future road design parameters? Or what should we be doing with road versus streets and things like that? Now, as we do this, as we start thinking about doing this, we need to make sure that we're aware of what else is happening. There's no point in us spending a lot of time and effort getting smart on something, only to go to Tom Pizzani and say, Bradley, we've learned this stuff. And he's like, oh, I got a whole group that does this already. You could have just had.
But here's the thing is that I sit on a couple of different boards and attend a couple of different meetings. And I do hear that. People come in with all kinds of great ideas. And Tom says, yeah, we're on that. We're on that. We're not. We have these amazingly gifted engineers and designers working for FCDOT. And I mean, they're doing their job. We probably don't need to be supplementing their job with us coming along with knowledge because we've gone on a field trip. I mean, field trips are great, but I'm a little continuing to have this, what is our, kind of an existential question. What is the purpose of us doing this? And what is our end? And where should we be spending our energy? Because frankly, we could be talking about this work plan in another 2 months, and then it's going to be June.
Go ahead. I'll let others talk.
You want me to jump in?
If you'd like to.
Go ahead, Kevin.
With the exception of field trips, as a former or maybe still current field trip director, I don't want to denigrate those, but I kind of agree with what Kelly was saying. In fact, my comment was going to be, there's just so much on here, Mike, and I want to tread somewhat lightly because I wasn't at your meeting, but at least the more senior members would never see the end of this list reached. I just have this concern that we would spend too much time talking about what we should be doing instead of actually, hitting a few topics that we can maybe have an impact on. And on the narrow sense, I would definitely highlight flexible non-POV transportation, as something that's current and maybe something we could have an impact, maybe make some suggestions to the Board of Supervisors. And I'm sure there are others on here, but I would endorse Kelly's larger point there that, we do have great staff. We don't want to try to outdo them, but if we can look at something that hasn't been looked at or, bring something new to it, that's fine. But at the end of the day, just to have some concrete points that we can get to versus just, maybe continuing to strategize. So that would be my comments and concerns.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you that having been on this commission since Hector was a pup, that the mentality here has changed over the years. If you go back to the way it was 25 years ago, yeah, I was here. The mentality was, how many cubic feet of concrete can we pour? So you had things like the Springfield spaghetti ball, and how we're going to run the metro to the moon. and that kind of thing. We're not going to do that anymore. We know we're not going to do that anymore. So what direction are we going to take? And Rachel kind of hints at this. She says, we're not going to drive as much. We're going to try to use public transportation more. And those kinds of things are going to make a difference in the way you do transportation. But Kevin's quite right. Non-POV transportation. But, you know, Kelly's point was we got to have kind of an existential direction of how you see the future. And I think it's right there in front of us. I mean, we all know what it is. We're simply not going to be doing this. And so one of the things that could help us is, again, to get a hold of the people who make a living doing this. And that's why I suggest, suggested Uber, Lyft, FedEx, United Parcel Service, because those people, their livelihoods depend on getting this right. If they don't, they're going to go out of business. If they get it right, they're going to make some money, a lot of money. So that's why if those people can let us peer into the future or how they see the future a little bit, then we can come up with some ways to give them streets or roads or something else that will work. I mean, I see it here in Falls Church City and in Arlington. They've got more complete streets. They've got the buildings that are built up to the street. They've got more multi-story development, things that would have been unheard of 40 years ago. And as I pointed out in the meeting, that the shopping centers along Route 1 are obsolete. And those are going to change. They're not going to build any more of those anymore. So what do we do with the ones we have, and what are we going to replace them with? And the supervisors are the ones that have to make those decisions. I think we can kind of chime in on that.
Well, Roger, on what criteria should they make those determinations, and how can we advise them? And be specific, please, because the common theme here has been we need to be more specific. I agree. This paper proposes to do that. I think we need to be equally specific with whatever we're talking about. How? What steps we take?
We can talk about things because some of this is in modern urban design. You do what they do with the George Mason Center in downtown Falls Church. It's a multi-use facility. It's built right up to the street. So you can actually walk on the street and walk into a store or a restaurant, and the parking is behind the building. This is the way they used to build things back in the 30s. We're going to go back to that. We're not going to have these mammoth parking lots in front of these huge shopping centers like we have over here at Seven Corners, which was probably one of the first shopping centers on the East Coast. It was built in 1954, and it looks like 1954. We're not going to do that anymore. Why? It's too much waste of space. We've got problems with runoff, pollution, and we don't want to make things too horribly convenient for cars. But if you don't do that, you got to give people choices, some other alternatives. Then you have all these neighborhoods like Broadmont and Falls Church. It's a lovely neighborhood. It's back there in the woods. It's bucolic. You can't afford to live there, but it's there. Those people aren't going to move. If I lived there, I wouldn't move either. I live where I do, and I'm not going to move.
Okay.
I'd like to have an alternative to taking my car and driving it.
Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to shut up. I've said enough.
No. Well, here, Jeremy, and then Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. First, Mike, let me say thank you for putting this together because it was a lot of summarizing what we did. I think first to answer your question, I think in my view, these do hit the issue areas that we should be focused on. There's certainly a good amount of overlap between all of them, and so I think some of that needs to be flushed out. But there's certainly areas where I think that we can have an impact. I think to the larger existential question, we're one voice in a lot of input that goes into SCDOT, into the county, but we're an important voice, and we should be talking about these issues. You know, things don't change unless people start talking about them. And we're not talking about kind of the curve of the road, but we're talking about safety improvements. We're talking about what the priorities should be for the county. And, maybe the county they share a lot of the views that citizens have and that members of the TAC have, but it doesn't happen unless people raise those concerns. I mean, we didn't see changes into our community until people came together and started talking about them. And so I think that's an opportunity for TAC to talk about these things when, the county can't move forward unless there's a lot of support for changes. And if we want to make connected streets and we want to make improve the level of service to streets to make it easier to cross, there needs to be community support. And if there's support among the TAC, I think that's something that we should be talking about and raising, and making sure our view of the priorities of Fairfax County, whether they're existing priorities, I think we can still have our own input into them. And so so again, Mike, thanks for putting this together. I think we need to flush it out a little bit more, but happy to help with that.
Thank you very much. Kelly?
Yeah, and Mike, I don't want to, denigrate anything that you've done because you have worked hard, and I do appreciate it. I'm still just flailing, trying to figure out, what my purpose is on this committee,
Mm-hmm.
and what the purpose of the committee is. I'm sorry, the commission.
Yeah.
But if we decide, for instance, we're hearing a lot about micromobility, we're hearing about a lot about safety. If we decide that's one of our priority issues, and we have experts who come in at the next meeting and say, these are the 5 areas in which Fairfax County could do something differently, but doesn't seem inclined to do so. That gives us something that's an imperative. That gives us something that we can take a hold of and say, we really line up with this, and we want to take that to the supervisors. Maybe it's something about, the bus rapid transit. Maybe it's something about equity. But I think we really need to land on those things and then have very specific strategies of who we want to talk to, who we want to hear from, and what we plan to do with that information, which requires all of us, including me, and me probably most of all, to look at documents that come to us sooner than 5 minutes before the committee meeting or the commission meeting.
As long as it's sent more than 5 minutes before, yes.
To have some time, because these are big issues. Never mind the money involved. These are big philosophical issues because the decisions that we support and the decisions that the supervisors make, my grandchildren, if I ever get any, hopefully, will be the ones that benefit from that. It's not what's going to benefit me down the road. It's going to be what benefits them and makes their world better. And so, that's why some of the smart technology, it's really good to get smart on it. But we need to do something with all this smart information we take in and then turn around and do. And maybe I'm just because I'm a little more action oriented, but I don't mind learning new things. I like learning new things, but then I like to repackage and put it into action in some way that makes a difference.
I will respond to that and then want to open up more. And first, I appreciate your gracious remarks, but also I really do appreciate the comments, critiques, etc. I know I end up being a little bit of a sort of a target because of it, because I have to put it together. But the point is that we talk about it and we work through these things. And so I'm happy to provide the the document here that we can chew on. But Kelly, I want to pick up on one thing you said, because I think it's very important. It really helps to me sort of crystallize why we need to do things. When you talk about having somebody who's doing something that we can embrace, it's not that easy to find. We're looking for that one group or the 2 or 3 groups whose efforts we synthesize or coordinate to really put this stuff together. Now, I don't presume that everything going on is not going well. And I want to also, again, give kudos to FCDOT because, one of the reasons we started sort of looking at this is because so much of what they do is so good. And, it sounds kind of ironic that, part of our problem is they're so good, but that's okay. We know we want that. That is of immense value to the county. So we're looking for the value adds. And when you're working with FCDOT, a very large, professional, well-run organization, we have to match their pace. We can't match everything. We cannot be FCDOT. We can't possibly try and do that. And I recognize that everything on this list will never get to all of it. But the idea, though, is at least we have a map. As we look at things, we can say, we want to go here. Wherever here is, I've got those 3 yellows, and I think we need to add the flexible non-PUV transportation, because I'm hearing loud and clear that's important too, and we should do that. And it certainly, gets us into some safety things there, because if you've got scooters and stuff like that on the sidewalks, you can have problems there too. But I think that it's our opportunity to try and pull these things together, to bring things together, because I think in most of these cases, particularly the kind of things we'd like to bring to our supervisors, that single answer probably doesn't exist. Or if it is, we haven't found it yet. Or if CDOT hasn't found it yet. As we get through it, we will find it. Either it's there, we identify it, we take that 1 or 2 people, and we push them up to the board of supervisors, so to speak, and say, listen to them. They've got it right. We can do that. We can also look at 2 or 3 folks and say it's a combination of these 3 things, and describe to the board of supervisors why we think this combination of things seems to make sense. But I also like your comments about being action-oriented. Jeremy, you've talked about that in the past as well too. I think all of us are thinking that way to one degree or another in different ways. We want to do something productive, and I think we can, and that's what this is about. Is trying to figure out where to focus, because once we dive into something, we're not putting blinders on because we're keeping an eye on things. That's part of what this list is about, is sort of to check this list every now and again, make sure that we haven't overlooked something that's emerging that we didn't think was a big deal, but turns out to be one. But we sort of put on a little blinders. We say we're going to focus in on some things because we know we need to have more depth. And when we do that, we won't be looking at other stuff. And we need to be careful when we make that decision. Other commissioners like to make a comment? I don't want to call on people, although I will, because at some point I'd like to hear from everybody, please. But I don't know, Alexis, you made the mistake of putting on your camera. Does that mean you're ready, please? Alexis?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just concur with the sort of existential aspect of what we've been discussing, that I think we need to come to a consensus on how we want to address that and move forward. And my personal view on that is that we do need to take in information and hear from experts on these different topics, but as Kelly was saying, we need to synthesize and we need to take some sort of action on that. And I think what would be appropriate for the TAC would be maybe we're appointed by politicians. We're working volunteering for politicians who make policy and enact policy, and we have FCDOT, who is awesome at implementing and studying and handling the logistics of all of that. So I definitely do not think we should be in the business of trying to replicate that, but I do think that we have a role in making recommendations, resolutions, whatever you want to call it, as we are learning about these various topics that we have outlined here on this work plan, whichever ones we decide to move ahead with. So that's where I think I see the TAC should go, and could have a purpose that's meaningful, that's also action oriented, where we say, okay, we're going to look at this, we're going to talk about it, we're going to learn more about it, and then we're going to make a recommendation on how we think the county should address it, how they should implement it or not implement it or change it or whatnot. So that's where I hope to see us move ahead.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I think as far as I can tell, the only one who's still here we haven't heard from is our esteemed vice chair. Mayor Pauline, do you have any comments you'd like to offer? Oh, there she is. You're on mute. I think. No, you're not. For some reason, can't hear you, Mayor Pauline. I think we heard something there.
All right, we all good now?
Gotcha. Can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. I was just that I've been fairly vocal about this in the past, and I don't think anything's really changed. It seems like we're on the track of just, you know, more or less getting the agenda so we stop debating every week what to discuss next. But I mean, everyone seems to be on the same page that we want to end in some sort of action with everything that we're hearing about. My biggest frustrations in the past had been that we were listening to great presentations, but all we did was listen and we didn't do anything. We had no recommendations going to the board, to our individual supervisors, or to anybody. And so, you know, we each have our own subjects that we feel more passionate about, and it's just selecting which ones as the board together that we're going to focus on. I think everyone seems to be in agreement. We're just all phrasing it slightly different from my perspective.
I do see commonality, yes. You know, and Kelly, just to pick up on your point again about, you know, reading more and stuff like that. Yes, there will be require some home study about this. One of the things I've talked about in the past is if there's areas where a commissioner or two would like to lead our investigation of an area, to be our in-house subject experts on whatever topic it is that we're looking at. You know, we have two of our commissioners that are representatives of the Bike and Trails Committee. So, you know, perhaps that's where the pedestrian bike safety thing goes. Certainly there'll be a connection. But I think anything that starts to pull the resources together with the information needs of the TAC to try and have a focused conversation, so that by the time we're done reading and thinking, and I don't want this to take 6 months, we can say, okay, we're confident that we think this is the what we ought to tell the Board of Supervisors. That's the holy grail. That's the action we're trying to get to, is what we tell the Board of Supervisors in whatever area we want to talk to them about. According to the agenda, we're at the end of the conversation here. I specifically did not want to have a very long meeting this time because we spent so much time on the offsite. We were there 6 solid hours. It was very productive. And so I wanted to give folks a little bit of a break there. But also, I think that folks need to think about this a little bit. Talk amongst yourselves, groups of 2 only. You know, if you want to think about it, give me a call. You know, one of the things that we can consider doing for those who are interested, and only for those who are interested, we could have a work session on April the 6th, or anytime we want, but let's say April the 6th, to hone in on these focus areas. I'm very sensitive to not just talking about talking. I've tried throughout each of the each version of the document to be more specific about what we're trying to do, to propose areas to focus in, so that we can actually decide, yes, these are the areas we want to have actions. If you agree or disagree, and in fact, you know, the comments about flexible non-PUV transportation, copy. Next time I'll have a yellow line about that. You know, and I think that in a minute we'll talk about some of our next meetings, and we'll talk about when we try and get Uber, Lyft, and VA in here. But please be specific. Tell me the particular changes you'd like to see. Unfortunately, given our FOIA rules, you can't send it to everybody. But that's why I'm thinking about a meeting on the 6th of April. If you want, send your stuff to me. I'll update this. And for those who've given me comments, if there's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 of us, and have a conversation about it to try and keep move this forward. But we're at the stage where it is time to get to the Board of Supervisors, Walter Alcorn, et cetera, with some things, and so we need to decide what we're gonna do. Kelly, I see your screen on.
I've been taking notes, so I have to not look at a screen and so
oh,
I keep
yes.
closing it up. Okay, so here's an example.
Okay.
I believe that bike detours that are going to be longer than 2 weeks should have every bit of signage and quality redirect that road detours have when they are on major commuter routes. An example is Fairfax County Parkway Trail. There is a program that Dominion Energy is doing right now that has it blocked off until mid-May, and they've created a horrible reroute. I've brought this to the attention of FCDOT and VDOT, and they're working it and blah, blah, blah. But the point is that if that had been a road detour, it would have had all kinds of signage that gave notice in advance, that gave a phone number and a name of someone to call, and it would have been a good detour rather than the bumpy gravel and mud that it is. So that's in my area. So personally, that's something that's really annoying to me. But on a grander scale, it seems like recommending to the supervisors that they implement into, I don't know, the comprehensive plan or whatever it is, that contractors must do the same level of detour response. I don't even know the language for this on commuter trails that they have to do on road. Then we're setting a standard. Okay, so having told you that, I'm not telling you guys all that to whine about that, but is that an example of the kind of thing that would be helpful coming from this commission to the supervisors for them to then direct SCDOT to work with VDOT and make it so?
I'm prepared to answer, but let me offer the opportunity for the commissioners to weigh in first. Jeremy, I see your camera. Would you like to?
I say yes. I mean, maybe that's not the only thing that we provide. Maybe it's more comprehensive than that. But I think that's a good example of why we need a diverse group of folks that come in and meet with us, because that might not be something that we hear from county staff, right? That's just not what they're focused on. But it might, a bicycle group or other community groups would be interested in that and might raise that to the TAC.
Yes, 1,000%, Kelly.
Okay. Was that right? Yes. Okay. I'll show my hand here. I agree as well. That is absolutely an example of something we can do. The only thing to add to it, I think, adding to Jeremy's comments a little bit, is as we're making recommendations in the bike area, I'd like to be thinking about it a bit comprehensively. Guiding principle number 1, apply a holistic approach to addressing issues to maximum extent practical. That may be exactly where we end up. Through our research, we may find, well, there's a reason we want to do 2 things. That this is sort of symptomatic of some other bike safety issue, because clearly it's a safety issue. So that may be where we end up, but that's exactly the kind of thing we want to do. But I'd like to have a little bit wider aperture as we go through to feel comfortable that we've got a good, solid recommendation that makes sense from a number of different perspectives. And Jeremy, again, back to your point, yes, talk to groups. They'll tell us things in a way that we've not thought about them. And engage in the dialogue, get some of that buy-in, some of that outreach and things like that. And that is a role that the TAC has often played, is being a connector to the community. That's certainly something we can do.
And of course, I have one more thing.
Sure, go ahead, please do.
And this is related to logging in and seeing the after effect of Roger's close encounter with possibly an uninsured motorist. And he said that the guy wasn't cited. And, if the guy was looking at anything else, he says another pedestrian, but if the guy's looking at anything else, he's distracted. And why do our police not go ahead and issue the citation? Because the person can always go in and fight it and let a judge decide. But the point is, their first reaction is to say, you know what, the pedestrian probably shouldn't have been where he was. And that cyclist, he probably shouldn't have been where he was either. And so that's a cultural change that I would like to see within the bike and pedestrian safety community. And is that the kind of thing that this commission should be bringing to our supervisors? Because I can guarantee I'm bringing it to Shemley and Walter.
I'll cut to the chase on this one, absolutely. And I know you've mentioned this during the offsite about enforcement actions and things like that. A little sensitive, but hey, that could be one of the reasons why FCDOT, and I won't judge what FCDOT is or is not doing there, but it could be one of the reasons it's not at the top on their list. Who's to say? That's why we do our research. That's why we find out. But yes, and education is absolutely part of this. And in fact, I don't have, I thought I put enforcement in there somewhere. I will admit that I was, there it is. I put it under road design parameters because as you talk about it for speed limits, we need to put it in pedestrian and bike safety as well. So I agree. That's a factor. Okay.
I'll agree with that too. I think that's probably the kind of thing you're going to have to do to have people feel more confident about riding their bicycle. I mean, if we see too many Kevins around, we're probably all going to go back to our Cadillac Eldorados. And that's not what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's an example of the differences. In France, if you come to a stop sign as a cyclist, you're supposed to stop. If you do not put your foot on the ground, you can be cited for failure to stop. That's a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't do that in this country. I'm not sure that we do. But in France, particularly in Paris, that's the law. And I guess police do cite bicyclists for not stopping when they're supposed to stop. I don't want to pick on cyclists.
Not going to
I'm picking on cyclists.
Well, whoever's breaking the laws.
But that's just a change. That's the difference in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more bicycle-oriented city, and they do that.
I can argue that that changes in culture, changes in view, are exactly the kind of thing where the TAC can potentially be of help, particularly with our connections, which we can continue to grow to outside groups, both to learn what they're thinking and to transmit some thoughts back to them in cooperation, obviously, with the Board of Supervisors. Again, not that FCDOT can't do this, but we complement what they're doing. We don't replace it. And if there's a cultural change that needs to happen, then that's something we talk about. We talk about it in those terms.
Well, another thing we might like to know, again, I'm going to go back to FedEx and United. Those companies have been around for a long, long time. But it might be interesting if they told us, well, residential delivery is the fastest growing segment of our business. Most of our business was delivery to other businesses. Now it's to residential. That would be an interesting factoid to know. We point out to the supervisors that these delivery services see delivery to private residences is the fastest growing segment of their business.
Mm-hmm.
You factor that into how you design and build things. Rather than United Parcel, which delivers parcels primarily to other businesses, as well as other private delivery services, whether you're doing DoorDash or Papa John's or whatever it is. That they would say, well, this is a big business. Is home delivery of everything from parcels to furniture to meals. I mean, and we know it's been going on.
True. And you're right. Absolutely, that's something we need to be mindful of as we go forward.
Well, that's one of the reasons I was very interested in the story on NPR this morning about these companies that are making a commitment to electric vehicles, because that is a factoid. If they're making a commitment to it, they're not doing it to be green. They're doing it because it hits the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So that tells me something. It tells me that these electric vehicles aren't toys anymore.
Oh, very true.
You can run the thing backward. If they're doing it, they must have a line on something. because
Yes.
the reduced maintenance costs, even though they're more expensive to buy, and their life cycle costs are getting down to the point where it makes sense for them to do this.
Okay.
Because they're not going to do it just to please AOC and paint themselves green. The trucks are brown. But
there we go. On that note, I know I appreciate that, but I do want to try and bring the meeting to a closer, not instantly, but quickly. If there are some other comments, certainly would entertain them. What I'll ask is, sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
I wanted to respond to Kelly. I'm a big fan of discretion among our police force. I think we have a pretty well-educated police force. In this particular instance, and I'm glad to see that my Power Rangers or whatever paws bandage that I've got on has brought so much discussion tonight. But yeah, I think, in hindsight, I probably would have preferred that he'd been cited. But I think on the other side, when we drive a car, maybe many of us have been in the situation where we pull up to the intersection and we're ready to go and we don't see as much as we should see left to right. And I think it'll, on a low level, which this was, even though the damage was a little more serious than you might expect from a low level impact. I can understand the discretion there, but I also think in this case, not to litigate it here, the driver of the car misrepresented the situation. He spoke of another pedestrian. If there was another pedestrian, I think he or she would have stopped to render assistance. He also said something about poor lighting, and I don't think that was the case either. But I do respect discretion. On the other point you raised on the bicycle trail, just if I were the dictator here, how I would handle that is I would immediately put that to Calvin to take to the appropriate FCDOT member and to see if he could resolve that, and if he couldn't, ask them who we would need to bring into a meeting to address that, so we could make a recommendation to the board to effectuate what Kelly had said.
Yeah, as for the specific one that's in my area, I've already brought it up. But as kind of an overall, who should we be bringing this to? I totally agree. And, I find it interesting that Roger was talking about France, because I spent a number of my formative years in Japan, where if you have a liability issue between a bicycle, a pedestrian, and a car, the person who has the most force behind them is the person who's the most liable. And so if a bicyclist doesn't look up and runs into a car, it's the person driving the car who is going to be most liable, because they have the huge thing that they need to be much more careful. So it's a kind of a different sense of liability and all, but our system is the way it is at this point. And I just think that the enforcement issue is something that they're treading delicately right now, because even the League of American Bicyclists has dropped the E of enforcement because they feel like it's been disproportionately used against communities of color. And I respect that, but at the same time, that lets a lot of people off the hook who should be paying a lot more attention to the world around them when they're driving something that's over 2,000 pounds. But where we take that, I don't know. I don't know what the relationship is between FCDOT and the police. Maybe that's what we need to do. Invite someone like Tom Bashadny in along with the new chief and say, what is your relationship? How can we help nurture that? But anyway, I'm down to 12% on my phone, so I'm probably going to have to go off anyway. But I'm done for the evening. Thank you. This has been really productive in the sense that I feel like we're moving somewhere, or at least I am. Thanks, Mom.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Kelly. Thank you. And I actually take notes too. So if you do, if your screen goes black, get back with me and I'll help you, finish up with whatever you might have missed. But I will say, Kevin's point.
Before she goes, if I'm sorry, Mike, I just have to say, Kelly, congratulations on your technical solving them. And for a minute, I thought maybe Calvin had swapped your problems and given them to Noel, because for a while there, when Noel was speaking and then Mike went out, it got very disruptive. But I'm glad to see that you came on very clearly tonight.
Yeah, I'm just using my phone. I gave up.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Sorry they didn't get it fixed.
That's okay.
Apologies, Mike.
I appreciate that. But while the two of you are still here, I can see you at least for a moment here. Kevin, excellent idea about reaching out to FCDOT. The commissioners have done that in the past. And now that you've brought it up here in this meeting, it is a commission issue now. And one of our, and if one commissioner is interested in something, we can all be interested in it. We've talked about it. I think the detour sign issue is an important one. And in fact, Kevin, to pick up on your point, Calvin, can you please ask, who the person is in FCDOT at the top of this? Kelly, if you want us to go forward, talk to him about it. If you're satisfied, great. Tell us you're satisfied. If you're not, then we can talk about that too. But one thing that occurred to me while we're talking about, the liability issue for Kevin's bandage is back to safety education. Some of the education needs to be in the drivers because things have changed. And we can do that. You see? Well, we can talk about that kind of stuff. And, I would hesitate to, invite the chief of police and Tom in cold to talk, but we can sure lay some groundwork. We can sure do some homework and then talk to somebody halfway up the food chain or whatever. And then, maybe everything gets resolved. They sort of never have to come in. Or when they come in, they get the credit for doing this great thing, whatever this great thing is. That's fine too. But yes, these are exactly the kind of things that we can dive into, start connecting the dots and putting things together. It gets to be labor intensive, so we can't do it in too many places, but we can do it where we want to. And the question is where we want to.
So feel free to task me. I'm happy to make phone calls and have discussions and bring people in, hog tie them, whatever is necessary.
All right. Well, Calvin, while you're here, I take that as a request from Commissioner Westenhoff to forward the question to FCDOT. Kelly, if I could ask you please to write up the question for Calvin, let him find out who in FCDOT can answer the question, talk to him, about it, get back to us when you're ready. Next meeting, perhaps, if you can do it that quickly, if things work out, and then we'll, we can work on that. But I'd also like to remember that as we go into the bike safety issue, pedestrian bike safety issue, which I know we're going to work on. I'm sure we're going to work on that.
All right, I will write something up and send it to you, Mike. Make sure I'm articulating correctly what it is what we all think we heard.
Okay. All right.
And just quickly, if Rachel Flynn has no hesitancy appearing before our committee, I don't think you'll have any problem inviting the new, when we get one, the new chief of police. I think he'd be delighted to come in and address the TAC.
And I don't say he wouldn't. I think you're right. I think, in fact, you know what? I'm not going to put it on a piece of paper yet. I don't want to telegraph our punches, so to speak, but absolutely want to keep that in mind. Okay. Time marches on, and Kelly's battery continues to ebb. So let me go forward here. We're now to the agenda for the April TAC meeting. What I plan to do for this meeting, we were not able to, which is to discuss the comprehensive plan. They will be available next month to do that. That was one of the big pieces that we wanted to look at coming out of the offsite there. So I do want to do the comprehensive plan discussion in April. But the thing I also wanted to talk about, is to start getting involved in the pedestrian bike safety issues. This is, and not because it's on the list, but it's on the list because of all these things that are happening with Mr. Alcorn's bike ride, May 15th. Dale Castlew is having some events, April 21st and stuff like that. That's going to take a little bit of effort to pull that together. And I'm not saying it needs to happen in April, but the things are moving in the bike and pedestrian safety area. And I think it's something we need to get mindful of sooner rather than later. And so, yes, we have 2 folks that are on the Trails and Bikes Committee. Alexis is one, Pete is the other. Pete's not here this evening. Obviously, Kelly is Mr. Alcorn's representative here. So I'm not, pointing fingers or assigning things. It's not my role. But I would like to see about moving forward on that. And so if there's somebody who wants to volunteer right now to sort of do some research there, I'll accept a volunteer. If not, I may reach out afterwards, or reach out to me afterwards and talk and things like that. But would like to get someone to help orchestrate that activity.
I'll just throw out, I would think that maybe, and don't hate me for this, Kelly, but if Kelly, and she's allowed to talk to one member, either Alexis or Pete, and formulate what that agenda would be. It wouldn't be April, that's not enough time, but let her set the agenda item for that, for the bike safety, and in May or June. I mean, that could include, if we don't get a good answer back on our specific question on that we've asked FCDOT, she could fold that in there. But she seems to have a handle on that issue and what we might want to discuss. So if she's agreeable.
Yeah, I'll touch base with Alexis on that and go forward. Okay. I will note that May is Bike Safety or Bike Month, so it ties very well into that.
There you go.
Okay.
As was mentioned a bunch during the offsite, the active Fairfax plan is in full swing. So that might tie in well to that topic as well. Some sort of update or presentation on where that's headed and what the county is hearing from folks. It's a big public input effort.
Okay, and do I have that captured on the agenda here, or is that something different? I don't think I've got a bike safety. I've got Dale's event, which I don't know if that's the same thing. And then I know Mr. Alford is doing something.
It's the study or the plan is called Active Fairfax.
Oh, yes, we've talked. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Well, this is fantastic. Absolutely, Kelly and Alexis, thank you so much. That's of immense benefit. The one thing I would like to incorporate here, and part of it is, with Kelly being Mr. Alcorn's direct connection to the office there. But Dale had talked about doing some things in April, and recognize we're not going to be able to have our TAG event that soon, but maybe there's something that happens in April that we can do afterwards. So what I'll do is I'll reach out to Dale, find out a little bit more there, and then what I may do is refer him to the 2 of you to talk about what he's doing, and I'll explain, some of the focus things we're doing there, and then you can see how that fits in the bike safety activities as well.
Yeah, I know Dale. I bike with him and his wife, so.
Well, I don't need to be a middleman, Kelly. You're happy to talk to me. You can say that at the meeting. You want to reach out to him?
No, because I'm not sure what he's doing. I mean, he never ever talks about any of this relay stuff or anything when we're biking. So I would be interested to see what direction that comes from. But at least I know him. At least if I get a cold call, I know who it is.
There we go. Well, he and I had a chance to chat basically a couple days before the offsite last time, and he was being respectful of his role with the county, which is sort of temporary kind of thing, But it was a very good conversation. He mentioned that, and I told him that we'd like to talk to him more. So I'll do that because this will allow me to talk to him more and get a chance to pick his brain a little bit. Then after, well, I was going to say squeeze it dry. That's not possible. He knows far too much. After I squeeze a little bit off of the bike stuff, then I'll send him your way and let you talk to him.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. I think the comprehensive plan will probably be most of the meeting on April. We'll see if there's another topic there. If there's a project we should look at, we're always open to suggestions there. I know Linda's not on here right now, but Linda's talking about that. Kevin, you've mentioned it as well. We can sort of look at that as well. Calvin, keep an eye on me, please, for these sort of things. We can sort of fit those in. I'd like to have 2 topics a meeting, but I don't want to have 2 long topics a meeting. So I'm thinking one long-ish and one, a bit more digestible. But, we'll see as we go forward. Meeting with the Board of Transportation, Board of Supervisors, Transportation Aides, want to get a little further along. With our plan. I see that as sort of a coordination meeting as we go to the Board of Supervisors sometime over the summer. I need to bring on some follow-on TDM discussions there. Kevin's favorite topic: Uber, Lyft, and Via. I think it's something we should do. I do want to coordinate with David about that because I know he lobbies for them. Full disclosure, we'll need to disclose that he's doing that. There's a possibility he wouldn't be able to come. I don't think that's likely, but we'll check all the legal pieces there, make sure that's okay. But there's a number of things we've talked about with Uber, Via, and Lyft. Their lessons from the pandemic, parking grace things, to help bring folks home who've had a little too much to drink. The taxi commission relationship with taxis and things like that, although we wouldn't ask them about taxis. So I just sort of keep in mind that they're related a bit there. County transit on demand or something like that. I know Mr. Harity's interested in this. And then of course, disability access as well. So what I would suggest for Uber, Lyft, and Via, and Kevin, if you're willing to start, what should we ask them? What kind of things should we ask them to come talk to them about? I mean, yes, generally, but I'd like to be a little specific about it, if we could.
Well, last mile, where we're not serving last mile transportation or areas that are just, we don't, feel are receiving transportation. How are they ready to step in? Or do they have grand plans that they could replace parts of the connector route and do it better, running jitneys? I mean, they're just, it's just, we just want to pick their brains.
Okay, that's fair.
And don't forget Rogers, maybe it's too much for the same meeting, but the FedEx and the UPS.
That is my thought, although I recognize the similarities there.
Yeah.
But what we might is, and I don't want to prejudge until we've reached out to them there, but Uber, Lyft, and Via might be I don't know. I don't want to judge whether it's a big topic or a medium topic.
I think it's a big one.
Yeah, I'm thinking it is. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking it probably is. But what I don't want to do is hold up that for the last mile transportation stuff as well. So what I'll do is I will reach out to David there, certainly on the professional courtesy of letting him know because he lobbies for them. So I'll hook up with David about that. And sometime in the next few months, we'll try and get Uber, Lyft, and Via in here.
Hey, I mean, I didn't know he lobbied for him, but maybe that's a good thing because we struggled to find a contact, and you can get him in here.
Well, Tom offered that they have contacts as well too, and we certainly will work with FCDOT as well. And I know Tom has expressed some apprehensions about David's role, just in general. Not that there's any particular concern about David, just optics and things like that. So we'll move deliberately, but I'm sure we can work through this. Okay. I think that's as far as I want to go down the possible topics meeting. Calvin, I believe we I have a commitment from FCDOT staff to come talk about the comprehensive plan in April. So we're set with that. If that changes, let me know right away, please, because we'll have to redo our April meeting.
Yes, and they are looking for any specific question that we might have for them.
Okay.
So if you, I know that you take a note, if you can share that with us, then I can forward that to them so they can.
Actually, Calvin, what I'd like to do is set up a meeting with them. Because I like to talk to folks about stuff like that. Because part of what happens is as I talk to them and they tell me what they're doing, then I'll get some more ideas.
Okay, yeah, I can set a meeting for you and the chairperson. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully next week is a little bit better than last. Sorry.
Yeah, it sounds like the particular issues of bike and pedestrian safety as encompassed in the comp plan would be of note. I mean, something that we would be interested in. And, what does the comp plan envision for that last mile You know, when we
Yes.
talk about Uber and Lyft, I sit there and I kind of laugh because, you know, my kids will use Uber and Lyft. I only rarely have used anything like that. But their generation thinks nothing of it.
Yeah.
But the comp plan is their grandchildren. And it's not going to be anything as awkward as Uber and Lyft. It's going to be, you know, shared cars. It's going to be, if there are any cars, it's going to be a whole different landscape. And so maybe it's looking at that last mile. There's a group that does these Facebook postings in DC that's called What's in the Bike Lane Today, where people just take a shot and put it out on Twitter. And it is kind of an indictment on all of the delivery services and all of the last mile entities like Uber and Lyft that are littering the bike lane or blocking the bike lane. And, you know, it's right now, we kind of, you know, just post it on Twitter and laugh and go, oh, well, that's the way life is. But for my grandchildren, that's not going to be acceptable. They're going to want something different. They're going to want discrete lanes for everybody who's using that shared space. And so how does Fairfax County plan for something like that? So that would be my suggestion.
Agreed.
And I have a power cord, so I'm okay.
Fantastic. Agree. And in fact, I like the characterization as last mile. It's come up a couple times here. I think maybe that's one of the things we want to look at is last mile and talk about it that way. Because I think that helps organize things in a way it brings all the various pieces together in a way that we can look at it so comprehensively. Because this also is curbside management, you know, and parking and all sorts of different things. You know, as you get to that end state. But also, Kelly, absolutely agree about looking at the bike safety issues in the comprehensive plan. But that's one of the reasons look at the comprehensive plan, because as we know, there's more things in the plan that we might want to look at as well too. Bikes, we know, is going to be one of them. We've got a couple other candidates here, but that's one of the things I want to do about the comprehensive plan is look at it, because it's the comprehensive plan. There's a chance to look at it and go, hey, that's a good idea, or I think we don't need to do that, whatever the case may be.
Right. But if Calvin says they're looking for questions, what's come out of the offsite are those highlighted things, which is a concern for pedestrian and bike safety, especially in these, what did you call them? The activity centers. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, how are people going to live and work around those areas in a way 50 years from now that we can try to start imagining now and thinking about? And the only reference points we have is where we are. And so those would be, I think, inform those questions that Calvin can pass on.
Yes, although the way I'm going to set up the meeting is I'm going to talk to them and shape the conversation. And some expectations, I'm going to warn them that there are going to be a lot of questions about bike safety. That's going to be a big part of what we're going to look at in the comprehensive plan, absolutely.
But
I
not
also
just it's pedestrians.
What's that, sorry?
Not just bikes, pedestrians.
Bike and pedestrians, yes, I'm sorry. I should use those phrases interchangeably, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll train myself. So it's not just bike and pedestrian safety, though that will be a big piece. This is also a chance to look at the comprehensive plan for the other things we're looking at as well too. You know, the TDM and the roads and the streets definitions. You know, see what they're looking to do there.
I just add on to that. I think just transportation agnostic. I mean, we don't know what transportation is going to look like in 50 years, but I mean, that's part of the challenge we've had now is we built it based upon where we were. And now, you know, we want to get to places a lot of, multimodal ways. So I'd be interested to know how they're thinking about that as they work on it.
Yes. And don't worry, I'm not going to say don't talk about this or unduly influence to talk about that. We want to hear what they have to say, but also I want to be able to help guide the conversation a bit so that we're a bit more productive with our limited amount of time. But yes, what is one of our guiding principles here? Recognize complexity of issues differ. Pre-COVID assumptions in a post-COVID environment. You know, shorthand for things have changed. Okay, well, that's what I have for the agenda for the meeting there. We'll go ahead with the comprehensive plan. If somebody has a specific thing they'd like to put in the agenda, raise it anytime. We've got the paper here. Send something to me one at a time. Copy Calvin, and we'll find a place to put it. We'll have some flexibility here. We'll get a battle rhythm going forward. But please feel free to suggest things as well. With that, I am going to have a very, you know what? I don't think there's anything I really need to report on because we've talked a lot about the stuff I really wanted to do here. So I'm going to yield my time for the chairman's report and go through the commissioner's updates. And what I'll do is I'll call on you in the order in which we open up the meeting here, and then where's that going to go? And so then see if you've got any last comments here. And so to start, that would be, if she's still here, Linda Sperman. Okay. Next, Kevin Morse. Any comments, sir?
Two. One quickly, the TAC award.
Yes. As a matter of fact, thanks for raising it. I announced to Dale at the offset, because he was our panelist there, that we decided to give the award to the relay team. And so he's going to help us work it. There's a lot of folks that are involved, and we want to be able to make sure that all are appropriately recognized. Did that because it was a chance to have some kind of acknowledgement in a larger group for Dale, and we'd already decided that was the determination there.
And the achievement award or the lifetime.
That's something I need to follow up with David on, because I still need to talk to Kathy. If not, I'm just going to go forward.
Okay. The second thing was, Alexis, I hope you're still on. In Chairman McKay's newsletter, there was something, he released something, I thought, recommendations on equity Fairfax, and maybe it's active Fairfax. I thought it was equity. And I scanned it, and then I actually did a word search because I could not find the word transportation in there at all. Am I looking at the wrong report, or am I missing something? Because we just, we talked about that last meeting at some length, and I didn't see anything in there.
I thought it was one of the 9 priority areas, but I will look at the site and get back to you on that.
Okay, maybe I missed it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did. But yeah, I'd appreciate you letting me know.
Sure, happy to.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mike.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Okay, let's see. I've said my piece. Kelly, anything from you? Last things?
I think I've said enough tonight, but thank you for asking.
Of course, happy to. Roger.
I'll pass.
Speaking of folks who said a lot, that's okay. What do you got?
I'll pass tonight. I've said enough.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate your inputs tonight. They're very helpful. Pete Sitnick, I don't believe is here. Alexis.
One quick reminder that the county annual repaving and restriping meetings are going on right now in each district. There's already 4 that have happened in 4 districts, but comments are open in all of them. And it's just an opportunity for the community to comment. The county uses VDOT's annual repaving program to add bike lanes and crosswalks and other things like that. And I'm sure you all know that, but in case you didn't, it's a good opportunity to comment and support those initiatives. And I have a link that I'll drop in the chat for that.
Actually, if you could, we're not supposed to use chats for these, although I see if you could send it to Calvin, that's okay. Send it to Calvin and he'll send it to us.
Okay.
Appreciate it though. Yeah, we were told in the we're not supposed to, so.
Yeah, I can send it out. I got it, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's all
Thanks.
I got.
Okay. Let's see. Jeremy.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Thank you. Eric, I don't believe he's come here late in the evening. David dropped off earlier, so it leaves it to our vice chair, Mary Pauline.
I don't have anything to add. So if we're all at the end, then I will motion to adjourn.
I hear a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
There is.
Okay, who's that who seconded?
Mason.
Okay, fantastic. All right, motion on the table to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Fair enough. We are adjourned at 10:01 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone. I think we had another good meeting. If you don't think so, talk amongst yourselves one at a time, two together, and get back to me. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.